of all, thank you all so much for joining us for our workshop this evening, which is Responsible Engagement with Sponsored Refugee Families. My name is Fred Young, and I'm the pastor at Trinity in Gettysburg. And I'm delighted to see all of you this evening. I recognize some names from last night's event that we had with the Reverend Dr. Karen Georgia Thompson, who talked about church's wider mission. And I look forward to our conversation this evening as we look into how churches can really be involved within their communities as well. So welcome, everyone. Before I introduce all of our speakers, will you join me in a word of prayer? Oh God, we recall all the times the storms of life have rocked us to the core. Through all of life's trials, we joined together to seek faith, hope, and salvation for all your people. We are thankful for all of the fathers and mothers, for grandfathers and grandmothers who have cared for their families through joys and sorrows, who have helped steer the ship towards safe shores. God, as we continue to talk about how we can help, welcome, and change the lives of many, remind us of all those who are still fleeing danger and persecution. We pray for the over 26 million refugees in the world. May they find comfort and peace in the midst of the hardship they face. Let us be a church of extravagant welcome and walk in solidarity and show our support to immigrants and refugees in need. And let us work together as individuals, families, and communities to build a world where all people are safe and treated with dignity. Amen. And I did adapt that prayer from the United Church of Christ website and the refugee worship that they had on their website. So those words were not all mine. Again, I am excited that you all have chosen to spend the evening with us here. And I just want to take a moment to introduce you to our presenters. The first is we have the very new, congratulations, Reverend Irene Willis Hassan from the United Church of Christ. I understand you were just ordained, was it last weekend? Okay, so congratulations on that. And Irene is the Minister for Refugee and Migration Services with the United Church of Christ. And we have Andrew, and I know I'm not going to pronounce your name correctly. So your last name, is it Mashas?
So no one ever does, but
okay.
That's okay. So it's actually pronounced Mashas.
Mashas, okay. So Andrew Mashas, who is the faith-based engagement specialist at Church World Services in Lancaster. So welcome, Andrew. And we also have with us Rayna Cooper, who is the first and only coordinator of our Refugee Resettlement Partnership of Gettysburg, where we have 8 churches working together here in our community with Afghan resettlement. So welcome to all 3 of you. I am excited to hear what you all have to share with us. And what will happen is we'll hear presentations from all 3, and then we'll open it up for a little bit of question and answer time before we close. And the last thing that I really need to share with all of you, you probably heard when you came in this evening that recording was in process or in progress. These sessions, the workshops are all being recorded. I just wanted you to know that so that whatever you say, someone will be hearing at a later date. So just keep that in mind as well. And I believe that they'll be posted on the Penn Central Conference website. So welcome, and I am going to hand the presentation. I don't know who's going first. So Rayna, I'm going to give it to you, and perhaps you or Irene can start. So take it away.
I was going to let Irene start and
Okay.
give the national perspective, and then I would speak on the local perspective, and then we'll turn it over to Andrew.
Excellent. Irene, it's all you.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Central Pennsylvania. Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be with you. I'm sorry for being a couple minutes late. Just as an antidote, last time I gave a night, I have two children, they're young. And last time I gave a night presentation, my son had recently gotten a gun that makes lewd noises for his birthday. And he walked in with this gun and started blasting it. It was very embarrassing. So I was hiding said lewd noise gun before coming into the meeting. So I'm Irene, and I am again the Refugee and Migration Minister at UCC National. I just want to give you a quick overview of what's going on in our denomination. So since August in 2021, we as a denomination have resettled approximately 1,000 Afghan individuals, which is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. This church has really stepped up, including here in Central Pennsylvania. And I'm just so grateful to have been a witness to all of that happening. Now, I have a lot of folks coming and asking about folks from the Ukraine that could be coming to the United States. So I just want to give you a little update about that, is that will probably not, in fact, I know it will not be the same situation as it was with Afghanistan. I'm sure Andrew could also attest to the fact that what happened in August was maybe the most unusual thing that's happened in refugee resettlement history, not only because we very suddenly got approximately 80,000 individuals that didn't mostly have the correct kind of processing that refugees or even asylum seekers typically have, but that it came right on the tails of refugee offices being pretty much decimated by becoming underfunded by the previous administration. So the fact that the church stepped in to handle that so well really speaks a lot to us. And now I know that well, let me back up to, I mentioned something about Ukraine. So Ukraine's going to be different, in which that is a huge refugee crisis, and our prayers go out to Europe. We also have appeal funding going out to our European partners. We're not going to see much of that in the United States. Any Ukrainians that are processed into the United States will not be processed in the same way that our new Afghan neighbors were. If we get Ukrainians, which again won't be very much, they'll be processed normally, and they'll be coming based on if they have probable friends or family that are living here. So it'll be a lot easier transition for our new Ukrainian neighbors when they come, probably in a year or two mostly. So I just wanted to give you that, as I know that's a current context of refugee crisis that's happening that people are asking about. And while our prayers go out to them, please stay attentive to your Afghan neighbors as you have been. Also, asylum seekers coming from the southern border are another type of immigrant that have been coming in overwhelmingly, that if you're interested in learning about asylum accompaniment and what our church does for that, I'll be doing a series in July on asylum accompaniment, because that's another population that will really need added support that refugee offices don't have capacity to provide, because refugee offices overwhelmingly deal with I-94s, already processed visas, not so much asylum seekers. There's not as much resources available for that population. So again, if you're interested in learning more about asylum accompaniment and how to be an asylum accompaniment church, I would be happy to have that conversation with your collaborative or your local congregation. So about our friends from Afghanistan that came in, I know that many of your churches are currently hosting them, and given that the situation is 6 to 9 months in that you probably received a family on average, maybe it's only been 3 or 4, they've probably settled, gotten their home, found, the basics that they need, doctors, and gotten the kids into schools, gotten settled. And so probably what they're looking at is how to get jobs and careers and move upward trajectory into the American dream, as it were. And so I just wanted to provide you a couple resources that we have for that at UCC National. I'm going to keep my time brief because I think that your local your local resources, and Rayna and Andrew are going to be more valuable for this time. But we have a resource at UCC National called the Match Grant, which is based on a federal program. It is meant to be an incentive for refugees to take jobs that they don't want, basically, because the whole goal behind refugee resettlement is to get folks into a job so that they are self-sustaining. Now, we know that a job being a security guard or a janitor or working in a hotel, that's not necessarily self-sustainable, especially if your family is the size of 10, 11 people. But that is the expectation. And so this match grant puts them into incentive to take that job that may or may not match what they were expecting in coming to the United States, and incentivizes them by giving them matching funds in a savings account to use for getting a college education or recertified. Maybe your refugee head of household was a accountant back in their home country and they want to recertify. That costs a couple $1,000s. Or getting a car, so that a lot of refugee families from the Middle East and Africa like doing things like driving Uber. So this incentive program saves money for them, matches the money that they save through whatever job they get, but they have to go take that initial menial job that they don't necessarily want, matches it, and then in 6 months they're able to level up in their career towards whatever their version is of the American dream. Again, this is based on a federal program, and we've replicated it at UCC National, so you can apply for that grant. I'll drop the grant application in the chat. I also have an extended version of that very short snippet of what I just explained in my multimedia records. So I am also going to drop in the chat all of the multimedia resources that we have at UCC National that range from a longer version of what I just explained, how to keep good boundaries with your refugee families and help them succeed in a way that honors their dignity and their self-autonomy, but also makes sense culturally and contextually. So that's part of our multimedia resources. I have other resources that are about trauma-informed care when working with refugee families and best practices of approaching how to work with vulnerable populations, because it's not always predictable, in a informed way. And then other resources that are specifically, in fact, your group inspired me to do this series. We have a resource on Islam, and in particular Ramadan, but Islam, so that if you are hosting an Islamic family, 70% of the world's refugees are currently Islamic, that you can understand more cultural competency around the behaviors that you are seeing that you have questions about. So I'll drop a resource to that in the chat. And there's a nice little tool function there. So if you want to look up boundary training, you just type in boundary. You want to look up cultural competency, you just type in cultural competency, and I'll bring you up all the videos that we offer at National to help you be good stewards of welcoming your families. So again, I will drop the link to the grant. That is an incentive program for refugees to get jobs and sustain jobs so that they can level up into the careers that they want in the chat. And I will also drop the multimedia resource package that we offer at UCC National for all the questions that you may have around hosting a family. And then if you want to do asylum accompaniment, that's just a private email to me, which I'll also drop in the chat. So that's all I really had. And I think that we're saving questions for the end, right, Fred?
If anyone has any right now, that would be okay, but, or shall we save them to the end? And
I think Shirley had set it up so that they were saved to the end.
we'll save it to the end.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I'll pass it on to, I think, Rayna.
I guess I better unmute then, and thank you, Irene, and for Pastor Fred for the introduction and presentation. I'm going to speak out about our local resettlement effort here in Gettysburg, and I want to actually, if I can find my exit the full screen and pull up a PowerPoint. Can I do that, Paul?
Yeah, you should at the bottom. Oh, wait, where is it? Oh, yeah, there should be a green arrow button that says share screen.
Okay.
And if you click that, you should be able to choose your PowerPoint from the window and start sharing from there.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, then. And from the beginning, okay. All right, so move this out of the way. Okay, so we have a partnership here in Gettysburg, and it's an ecumenical partnership, a new word I've been hearing, so I applied it to our group here. We have 8 different churches and 7 different faiths, I guess, represented. And I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that we had here in meeting the needs of our family. So just a very little bit of background. Let's see if I can figure out how to go to the next slide. Okay. Yeah, previous. We started organizing last fall, and we welcomed a family of 10 from Afghanistan on February 12th. That's 8 children and 2 parents. The children were aged 4 to 20 when they arrived here, and a couple of them have had birthdays since then. We met them at the Lancaster airport on a very cold and windy day, and we were huddling. I guess they arrived about 45 minutes or an hour late, so we were out in the wind and trying to block some of that wind with the van that was there. So we have members, as I said, from 8 different churches, and I'm just going to show you a listing of those churches so you can think about that. But we have committee members from all of these different churches, and we did establish a board of directors as well as an organizational chart to kind of define how we would work together and how we would communicate with each other. So we have 8 different committees and members from different churches on different committees working together. We also have liaisons from each individual church that is charged with getting information from our refugee partnership to the church, and also bringing information from the church and what they are doing and how they would like to be involved back to the partnership. So this is our list of churches. As I said, we came up with an organizational chart as well as a covenant that defines the expectations and responsibilities of the individual churches to the partnership as a whole, and also explains any little areas of, you know, how we will work together and what we expect, and is there any financial and requirement and that sort of thing, which there wasn't. So this is basically churches were agreeing to work together and to serve this need as a group. The language was a big impediment, bigger than we thought. It's a major consideration in providing for our family's needs. We have, as I said, there are 8 children and 2 parents. The 2 parents do not speak English and they do not read English. 3 of the older boys do have a good bit of English, and they're learning more. And one of the boys was actually serving as an interpreter at Fort Dix, which is the safe haven base where they were housed from the middle of August until the middle of February, 6 months. So as a result, they were using him because he had some good English skills. He had attended a private school for a year and acquired those skills. So they were using him at the base in their regular trying to coordinate and communicate with 15,000 immigrants at that base. So he has been, we don't especially want to use a family member for communication, and yet there was that need here because we couldn't locate interpretation services that were available to us as much as we needed it. There's just so many different things we needed to communicate with the family. And so we did have him available, as well as the other two boys that speak some English. And this is a major barrier, when you don't have English skills, and even the alphabet is different from our alphabet. We can't read anything that they would write, and vice versa. It places a big barrier on their community engagement. How do they relate to other people? How do they establish services on their own? How they can't make a phone call to a business, even with the English skills of the one boy. Is just not he's just not able to take care of business by telephone. So many things that need to be handled by other people regarding setting up their utilities, negotiating a lease, calling for appointments. All of these things have been done by others since we received this family. We've gradually located some volunteer interpreters who are available by phone, and we have them available if we can, set up ahead of time a time that they're available to interpret for us, and also with the family members. And there is a fledgling interpretation service that's gearing up in our area, and just as soon as they have their price list complete, we'll be able to utilize that service as well. But I can't help being jealous. When you think about the many calls that you make, and you dial one or you push one for English and two for Spanish, think how nice it would be if you could push 3 for Pashto and 4 for Dari, and have the ability for a family member to call and make arrangements on their own. So it really does point up the need for these types of services. I will say we've been extraordinarily pleased with WellSpan, which is the major medical care provider in our area, because they just do that automatically. When they realize the family can't speak English, they will just say, what language? And within minutes, they have a Pashto interpreter on the line. And this is so important with medical care, to be able to ask the questions that you need to ask and hear the answers from the professional. And it's almost like they have some kind of system where all of the things that the family member says or are put on a screen, because the interpreter reads it back verbatim. Every little is in there. And it's just amazing to me that they have the technology to be able to interpret so distinctly and accurately. So medical services have been covered that way, and we're very grateful for that. But many other things, Comcast, surprisingly, they had a terrific interpreter language line available as well. So that was the one service that we did work with that had an interpreter. Something else we kind of didn't think about too much previously was this whole driver training. They want to be independent. The family wants to have an automobile. They want to be able to put the family in the car and drive wherever they want to, whether it's to visit relatives across the country, or just to go to a store or a place of amusement, a park, and yet they're dependent on us for transportation. We do have 16 people on our transportation team, and we schedule it according to their needs. We're taking them grocery shopping twice a week. We've made bicycles available to them so that they have an alternate way to get to a grocery store or other places, because it's a small town. Gettysburg is pretty small. So bicycles are one way that we worked with a local organization called Happy in order to get the bicycles and make sure that they were in good condition and that they have helmets and they have a cable lock to secure the bicycle, as well as panniers to carry groceries and so forth. But the desire for a car, again, that's going to be difficult for those with limited English and reading skills, language skills, the driver training, test taking, competence in being able to communicate when you're stopped by law enforcement. This is a big deal, as we've seen so many incidents that occur when there's not good understanding between drivers and law enforcement. So language skills can be very important in that kind of situation as well, and even understanding what an officer might be trying to say to them about the way that they were driving. So again, Irene mentioned the Uber thing, and this is something our family hears from relatives and friends across the country, that Uber is a great way to make a living for your family. And, I don't know if they've looked at all the expenses for insurance in the car itself, and gasoline and maintenance and all of those things it takes to run a vehicle. But again, this is an issue the family feels is very important. And right now we have so many more important things we're working with the family on. We're leaving that up to them at this point. Even budgeting for that automobile will be something that will be necessary as they establish their independence, financial independence. And something that didn't seem like a huge big deal when we started was that to work with a resettlement agency, everyone on the team who's going to have more than casual contact with the family needs to have clearances done. And so this turned into quite a project in getting, I guess we have maybe 25 to 30 people who have clearances. And some of those, as I said, are for driving, as well as all of the background checks, whereas some of them are without the extra driving clearances. But if you're going to have contact with the family with children, as this family does have children, then you need to have an FBI check, the Pennsylvania State Police check, mandated reporter training, and documenting your driving record, your auto insurance registration and driver's license. And all of those things are necessary, really, to ensure that the people that are working close with the family are not people who could take advantage of them and who have broken laws in the past and done things that are not acceptable. So we want to make sure the people we bring into contact with this family are as safe as possible. That has limited some people who wanted to work with the partnership because they wanted to work on a more limited basis, and yet even if they're going to help drive the family somewhere, they're going to need those credentials, because if you think about it, you drive the parents and a child somewhere, and the parent runs in to get something and you're left alone with a child, there's that mandated reporter training issue right there, that this person needs to have been cleared and have been trained in safety for working with children. So we feel it's very important. As I said, some people have chosen not to become too involved because of that. And yet there are things people can do without having that close contact with the family and needing to have those clearances. So just kind of going from one thing that we didn't quite expect to another. It was a big deal to get those done and all of them copied and sent in and get the final, the final blessing on them. I have a couple more things. I'm gonna talk about medical needs, a family of 10. Think about all the things you have to schedule for yourself, your primary care, any special test, imaging, x-ray, labs. And if you happen to go in for urgent care or emergency services, you're going to have all of that scheduled as well and follow-ups. So with a family of 10, it's no different. There are 10 people who need to have these things taken care of. And so medical management has been a very large portion of what we're doing lately. We've had 3 incidents where we needed to have urgent care or emergency services, nothing that turned out to be too serious. And yet all of those things had follow-up imaging and lab work and specimens and follow-up appointments, as well as just establishing care with a primary care provider and getting all their medical history there. Immunizations, we had all the children in the first week they arrived and got them to see a pediatrician and get their initial vaccinations. But that's not done because another 6 weeks or so, you go back and get further vaccinations when you're missing some of those childhood series of vaccines. So that's also turned into quite a project in getting everyone checked out and everyone seen for the various problems they're having. So I'm down to employment. And a house and a job are the major initial goals when you're settling a family. You have to have a house before you're going to get a family. And so there's always that, well, we could take a family if we had a house, or if we had a house, we could take a family. You can't get the family before you have the housing available. And yet you don't want to pay on housing that's not going to be utilized right away. So it's kind of a catch-22. Our family was one of the first to arrive at Fort Dix, the safe haven I described, and they were one of the very last to leave after 6 months in New Jersey at that safe haven. They were the last of the last group to leave. And one of the reasons was the size of their family and the lack of available housing with more than a couple of bedrooms. There's a lot of units that have 1 or 2 bedrooms, and this family couldn't live in a house like that with 10. We were fortunate to be able to access a 4-bedroom house at a very reasonable rate for our area. And the job came pretty quickly, as there are a number of employers looking for workers. The father in our family was able to secure a job with Gettysburg College here, and he's working in the dining hall. As we started to consider further opportunities for the family, though, maybe some extra work for the father, maybe some work for those 3 older boys, we started finding that people wanted to hire the family members. They wanted to hire them to do yard work, cleaning up gardens, clearing land, and other physical work on an occasional basis, and sometimes on a more extended basis. And when these offers became kind of a lot of them, I struggled with that idea, wondering, how we can ensure that a position was going to benefit the family in the long run in terms of having benefits, something that was resume building and that would be on the record. And if there were dangerous activities, that there would be safety protocols and safety training, plus safety equipment. So I was struggling with bringing people into contact with the family who wanted to hire them on that casual basis. And so that's something we found that our board was extremely helpful with. They were able to help us sort through some of the issues. And we developed a policy that was relating to those opportunities and what type of things we would present to the family as far as employment. Not to say that they couldn't accept casual employment from others that they came into contact on their own, but we just felt that for our organization, we should only be bringing them opportunities that had all of these elements. So the board has been helpful in that way, and in several other situations where, you know, something just comes up out of the blue. I'm the coordinator and I'm thinking, you know, what are we going to do? And so we hastily arranged a board meeting, and having the pastors or other leaders from the church there really has been a lifesaver in helping to determine what a good course of action is. So I'm so thankful that we have a board set up for that purpose. Finally, I'm finally going to change the slide here. There's the house, some of the rooms of the house. A lot of work. We had many of our committee members were there in the trenches helping to paint and scrape paint and rip out carpet and caulking in the bathroom, just many different things to get that house ready. And finally, I'm just going to leave it on this final slide because this is a scene of Gettysburg from up on the hill. If you were to go a little more to the right, you would see all the buildings in the town, but this is a more rural perspective. And this is the new home of 10 lovely people, each with their own personalities, and each of them with their own hopes and dreams. And it's something that just didn't crystallize prior to resettling this family, that it's very much like adopting a child. You don't adopt a child and then in a year or two say, okay, you're on your own. The ties of friendship and responsibility, I think, will endure long beyond our preconceived endpoint of taking this family for 1 or 2 years. And having brought this family to Gettysburg and assumed responsibility for helping them adjust and achieve, I feel that our lives will stay intertwined. It's not something to be taken on lightly. If the family moves on to a more desirable location, we'll feel proud that we provided a soft landing point for them in the USA, and that they were able to gear up to pursue their dreams further. If they stay in Gettysburg, and we will continue to help them as they learn and adjust, and we hope to continue to add to a small educational fund. Actually, we got from our national office in the form of a grant, the UCC, and that's going to serve as an educational fund to help the family get job training skills or continue their education and achieve the things they would like to achieve. Each and every member of this family has personal dreams that we hope to help them achieve, and we're in this for the long term. And I thank all of our volunteers, because all of this would not be happening without the people who have stepped up, and some of those people are on this call. And also for our leaders, our church leadership, and all facets of the UCC Church has been active in this, and we're very thankful for all levels of support. I'm going to turn this over to Andrew, and we'll have questions and answers after that.
Thank you. Yeah, if I can find my, I think I found my unmute button. Yeah, thanks. So sorry, I'm going to try to enlarge my screen on my side so I can see everyone's face. Get it back to the normal view here. There we go. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Just a quick thumbs up if you can hear me on these headphones. Yeah, my name is Andrew Mashas. I'm the faith-based engagement specialist at Church World Service in Lancaster. It is wonderful to be here. I have a very similar disclaimer in the vein that Irene did as well, and that is I cannot basically shield you from what could possibly be a variety of different noises you might hear in the background, including dinosaurs and or just general screaming of sheer terror, as from what I heard from a text I got from my wife, was that my 5-year-old was dressed as a dinosaur chasing my 2-year-old around in the living room. So I have tried my best to sequester myself. The problem is they know how to open the door. So I can't, I can't lock it. So I apologize if I just hope they don't come in with a cap gun. But anyway, yeah, it is fantastic to be here. The first thing I would really want to say and certainly stress is that make no mistake about it. What Rayna and her team have done is nothing short of miraculous. The coordination that was put together by her and her team to be able to do this, getting all of these different church partners involved, collaborating resources, building vision, creating a board. I mean, this was no small feat. One of the laments that I certainly have is that I felt at the time we as a staff at Church World Service were not able to actually resource her group as well as we felt like we should have or could have. So I'm very pleased to see at the end of the day, they were able to welcome a family from Afghanistan. The resettlement agency that they did work with are very dear friends of mine. And so we have talked a lot about what that project has looked like and maybe how we can honestly and sincerely take this model and plug it into possible other geographic locations across, well, certainly across central Pennsylvania. So there might be a lot of trailblazing that has happened that we might not realize yet. I also do want to back up a little bit and kind of look at where we are at in the realm of refugee resettlement in the United States. And it essentially starts with an email that I got about, well, last Friday. So every Friday, usually around 9:30 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, I get this email in my inbox from what is called the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees. And every week they put out a weekly bulletin. And it usually has different headlines of different various conflicts around the world that are seeing displaced people. Certainly things that don't always necessarily get on the news the way, say, an Afghanistan or Ukraine situation might, but things that might be happening in places like Chad in Africa or Yemen outside of the Middle East. All that still will play a huge part in the geopolitical game that is refugee resettlement. But interestingly, the email that I got last Friday had a rather sobering, for lack of a better term, headline in the subject line. And I felt like it was something, I felt the weight as I read this subject line as someone who works at this point in my life in refugee resettlement. And it said the UNHCR can now state that there are over 100 million displaced people around the world, hitting that mark for the very first time in human history. Now, that's not to say that all of those people are classified as refugees. This would include a variety of various categories that the UN uses, including internally displaced individuals, asylum seekers, what have you. But interestingly enough, if you were just to look at the number of refugees that was hovering around 26 million when I started this job about a year and a half ago, has escalated to well over 30 million today, almost exclusively based off of one rather major humanitarian crisis that has occurred over the last 6 weeks in the Ukraine. So there's a lot of, I wouldn't even call it hyperbole necessarily. There's a lot of grandiose statements about what this means in the realm, in the scope of history. As was stated earlier, you know, with the situation in Afghanistan, if you saw sort of what I saw on my television, I saw thousands of people flee for their lives in the Kabul airport as the Taliban retook over a country that has been at war with my own country for the last 2/3 of my lifetime. And in doing so, we embarked on what was an unprecedented endeavor in refugee resettlement history. And I thought, okay, this is something that I certainly was not, that no one in the refugee resettlement sector was prepared for, but we made it work. I was put into situations and positions that I did not have education or background or experience in, but as was stated earlier, with the lack of resources that has been given to the refugee resettlement system over the last 4.5 years, yeah, it was quite an endeavor. I often say to my wife that this is something that I will certainly tell my children about when I'll wait until they get a little older, probably to let them know how this all went down. And interestingly, you know, the largest humanitarian evacuation in US history, more than the fall of Saigon in 1975, more than any other endeavor that the United States has undertaken, I thought that maybe, just possibly, this was going to be the most unorthodox thing that we would experience in refugee resettlement during my very short career, only for Russia to then invade Ukraine over the last 2 months and create what is now another very unorthodox system. One that is based off of, that does not use the normal channels of refugee resettlement. One that relies on various models that are used in other countries, not necessarily adopted in the United States. One based off of specifically people who are able to petition for family members to be able to be resettled into the United States. On a normal day, when those two things are not intertwining themselves into making our world a little more complicated, the refugee resettlement program is indeed a complex web of intricate government players and geopolitical chessboard playing sometimes, but at the end of the day, it funnels down to the people in the United States who feel convicted, compelled to do this work. And that is one of the greatest treasures of my life, is being able to work with the church, to be able to do what I, in my humble opinion, is one of the best things that we do as a country, as a nation. You know, Rayna was mentioning about, you know, how she's not necessarily sure if the family that they have helped resettle will stay in Gettysburg. I can never guarantee that any family that that churches help resettle here in Lancaster will stay in Lancaster, and some haven't. Some have moved on. But one thing that I often tell churches who have done this kind of work is that I encourage them to look at, if there's a family that they're resettling, to look at the children specifically. You know, those children in this family from Afghanistan of 10, let's say they move to another state, it's entirely possible. Those children will grow up someday. And interestingly enough, there will be two defining moments of their lives. Basically, life before coming to the US and life after. And one thing that they will carry with them for the rest of their lifetime is that when they did arrive to the US, there was this group of people, this possibly even quirky group of people that didn't know us, had no reason really other than the faith and convictions that they've been given, and the calling that maybe have been put upon them to welcome us as a refugee family into the United States. It's undoubtedly not something that my own ancestors can claim when they arrived in the United States in the early 20th century. So it is an honor and a privilege to be able to work with the local church in doing this work. Church World Service is a national, actually a global organization that had started around the end of World War II, working in post-Reconstruction Europe as an ecumenical movement. There's that word. So we're keeping the spirit of that alive today, I can see. To basically do together what each individual denomination felt like they couldn't do separately. And that has evolved and shifted and morphed over time. But today what it looks like is various program areas around the world, but specifically for Lancaster, we are focused on welcoming refugees, asylum seekers, and immigrants into our community, doing things through resettlement services, employment services, and legal services for individuals and families. Interestingly enough, tomorrow is another interesting day because I get to have the honor of working with a specific, sorry, my computer just went out on me. It like blacked out for a second. That was very bizarre. Can you all still hear me? Still good? Okay. So tomorrow around 11:30 at night, I will not be in bed as much as I really want to be in bed, but I won't. I will be at the airport in Lancaster with a group of people who just so happened to be part of the Penn Central Conference of the UCC. And I had to make sure that I checked the website of the Penn Central Conference to make sure that they were a part of it, and they are. So assuming this website is up to date, yeah, it is essentially a co-sponsorship group from a UCC church here in Lancaster. We are going to rally tomorrow. I might take a nap between dinner and 11:30, but we're going to rally and we're going to go up to the airport and be the first faces that a family from the Democratic Republic of Congo sees when they arrive to the United States. Yeah, and this is not even the first family that this particular church is welcoming. They are also welcoming relatives of this Congolese family as well. It has been a joy and an absolute pleasure to work with this church. So my first expression would be thank you to the UCC for having this as such a core central part of identifying this as at the heart of God's mission around the world and certainly on our local level. So all of that to say, if you yourself find yourself in a church throughout central Pennsylvania, I would say that people often ask me, is there still a need? Is there a need in refugee resettlement for more churches to get involved, for more sponsorship groups, for, yeah, any just general support. And I often say that we are looking at resettling more refugees as a nation than we have in the last 30 years. If the system works the way that it's supposed to, and if the numbers are any indication of what we've committed to as a nation. So the answer is a resounding yes. The need is there. The need will always, hopefully always be there, because there will always be people who are displaced. It is unfortunately part of the human story. It is part of certainly the biblical story, interwoven through the entire text from front to back, from Genesis to Revelation. It is a book that is written by people who essentially are displaced. And so my appeal would be not to get necessarily overwhelmed with the prospect of resettling a family, putting together an entire ecumenical coalition with a board, and it is not necessarily something that you have to do. I mean, that is quite remarkable. But essentially it does start with one church to one family, possibly. Putting a group of people together who say, okay, we're going to commit to this for whether it's 6 months, a year, possibly even 2 years, to make sure that this family, this one family, is able to integrate into our community, is able to start new lives here, and hopefully create an experience that both the church and the family will be able to treasure for a lifetime. It will not be easy. It will be very messy, as Rayna can attest to. It will be very sticky. And I often say, and I had to say this to this UCC church last night when we had our final meeting before this family was coming. What I often say to churches when they ask me, what is the magic, what is the secret sauce of doing refugee resettlement? What's the thing to carry with you as you're walking into this work? And what I often say to churches is that you have to undoubtedly carry with you a posture of grace in every single step that you take. Grace with the family you are working with, hopefully grace with the fallible refugee resettlement agency that you're working with, and grace with yourselves. Grace with your teammates, with your church, with everyone that you're interacting with. And I think luckily, and this is why I like giving presentation to church folks, we know what grace is. We do. We know what it is. Deep, I think, in our soul, we know what that really means. And so I'm very appreciative of your time. I often do find that this line of work brings on a whole host of questions and discussions. So I wanted to make sure that we had also ample time for that as well, as I start to lose my voice, excuse me.
Well, thank you, Andrew and Rayna and Irene, for your wonderful presentations that I know have had to have sparked some questions from some of you. So what would you like to ask our panel this evening? And I know that in looking at time, we are at about an hour right now. I am not sure how long the workshop is to go, but I do want to give an opportunity for you all to ask questions. So if you want to unmute yourself, I would ask that if you are asking a question, to unmute yourself, as well as to hopefully show us yourselves too, because I'm looking at a screen that's almost black. There are a few folks that we can see. So who would like to be the first? Alyssa.
Hi, everybody. I'm grateful for this workshop. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. My question is rather particular. I'm part of a hodgepodge of people who got together to help the newly started Church World Service office in Harrisburg. And we're helping, there's a number of folks from St. Paul's UCC, along with some other handful of folks from just the community at large. And we're helping a family who has just resettled here from Guatemala. And I think they've been here 2 weeks. In fact, today was the day we helped to move them from their Airbnb into an apartment in Harrisburg. But my question is, we're also, because all of this happened very quickly, we did not get the kind of training as like a regular welcome team would get, I think, usually. And so we're going to get that welcome team training later on in June. And I get this sort of feeling that there might be another family that comes, and I'm worried that we're going to take on too much too fast, and we're going to get burnt out, and we're not going to be able to be helpful and be in solidarity and walk alongside the family that we're already, have committed to help. And so I'm wondering how long would you say, and I know everything is, it's all particular to different situations, but how long would a team wait until they take on their next family, I guess, is my question.
Andrew?
Yeah, I can answer that one, I think. Hi from St. Paul's. You guys are great. Thank you. First of all, I would say thank you for, let's call it what it is, being guinea pigs for the new Church World Service office in Harrisburg. I never really liked this term, but I often say this to my colleagues in the Harrisburg office, building the plane as they fly it, because I believe that their volunteer corps includes your church, another one, and my dad. That is the extent of their volunteer base. So usually when I have appealed to other, admittedly, when I've appealed to other teams to take on additional families, there's a number of factors that I do consider, which I realize as I'm formulating this answer that I'm doing the exact opposite with this UCC church that's meeting with this Congolese family tomorrow, because I did ask them to take on 2 families almost immediately. But that is not the most normal route. But again, I know that they're working on, they're a brand new office. And so coming up against churches that are resources that might be limited and how many teams they have available. But I would say that it is very important that you are mindful, and it sounds like you are already, of your own capacity. Burning out, fatigue through volunteerism is really something that, from my estimation, doesn't really help yourself or the families, for that matter, because you want to be able to give what you can. So my biggest encouragement would be talk to Dury about what I would certainly express to her what your capacity concerns are, and I think she's very gracious to hear those words.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, I also wanted to add to that I agree with Andrew. It's all contextual about the resources you have, but feel free to reach out to, I'm happy to hear there's another one that I haven't met. Hello, over at St. Paul UCC. I'm glad to hear that you guys are resettling as well. But you do have a resource in us at UCC National. We provide grants, not just the one I talked about, but other grants as well. And localized support. Like I said, Rayna and their team reached out with the cultural competency question and did a workshop for them on that because of the question they had. So I'm happy to tailor workshops to your group as well for whatever particular need comes up, to make sure that you know that you're not alone. We do have lots of churches across the denomination that are hosting multiple families. with varying range of success without burnout. So it is possible, but burnout's real. But please know that you have us over at UCC National on your team.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
May I just jump in here, please? Because I'm a member of that team at St. Paul's. And Fred, in response to your comment about only seeing blank screens, those of us who've been working for the past 2 days, helping the family have a clean house and beds put together and made, you don't want to see us and you don't want to smell us.
Okay, point taken. That's great.
But it has been wonderful. And I think we're aware of our reluctance to be burned out. And I think the hardest initial thrust of this, we're almost past it. And now there's going to be, maintenance work. And there's still, I have a question about vaccinations. I know Rayna mentioned the healthcare issues, but are there requirements as far as SSI cards or anything in order for people to become vaccinated?
Yes.
Would you repeat that question?
What are the requirements for people to receive vaccinations here?
Well, the
People who are
federal
refugees.
government has, they kind of monitor the immigrants' health by requiring 90-day physicals be done at a federal facility, a federally qualified health center. And so as far as I know, they need to have all of those communicable disease vaccinations that a normal family here in the US would get, as well as the COVID vaccinations if they have not had those already. And so we're just now pulling together all the records from various sources in order to complete their 90-day physicals and have the vaccine records in hand. But basically they've been getting all those childhood vaccinations and the COVID vaccines and boosters. I don't know if there's any more.
So do we need that information for us would be available at the local CWS, right?
Yeah, so the contexts are a little bit different, a little nuanced compared to like what Rayna is experiencing, what you folks are experiencing. So yeah, and that's mostly because with the situation with families from Afghanistan was completely unorthodox, really. Families like the Guatemalan family that you're working with would have come through, the Refugee Resettlement program that is administered by the UN in conjunction with the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security. The thorough medical screenings that they would have undergone would, first of all, list the vaccinations that they need, specifically if there are children in the family who need vaccinations for school enrollment. That is one of the biggest pieces. All that documentation should be on their person, actually in a not little white bag, but it went in a white bag that says IOM on it. And so when they go for their medical evaluation, assessment, and physical, those records will be turned over where individuals will receive updated vaccinations.
Okay, thank you. Because we were discussing that with the family this
Yeah,
afternoon, and I was completely at a loss as to know how we were supposed to proceed with that.
yeah. So the biggest piece with that I often tell teams is that when they do go in for their assessments, and especially for children, when they do receive updated vaccinations, you need to make sure that whatever clinic that you're taking them to hands over yellow vaccination cards that will be submitted to the school district.
Right. Great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right, so I know that Julie has had her hand up, and then we'll go on to Bruce. Bruce, I think you had your hand up as well. So Julie.
Yeah, I am in the Northern Association, and our association has a lot of teeny tiny rural churches. And in the winter of 2020, so you can figure out what happened to this idea, there was some movement within the association, actually coming from a couple of lay people who had a conversation with me and some other folks about it, about trying to see whether or not this is something we could do. There were concerns because we are pretty darn rural. About 40 minutes from State College in the Little Valleys. All our churches are tiny, so no church is big enough to really do this by themselves, but we might be big enough as an association, and we might be big enough if we found some ecumenical partners. Our next step was to get some idea of what this entails. And is there some way that we can get an idea? What does this entail? What kind of things will people do? How much of a commitment is it? How many bodies do you need to support this kind of thing? And to find out about the rural character of our area. Is this even something desirable? There was some concern that it might not even be desirable to have people kind of out in the boondocks.
If you don't mind, can I answer that, and then whoever else would like to, Rayna or Julie. Rayna came to me back in September with this idea and said, "Do you think we can do this?" And I said, "Well, alone, I think it's kind of a daunting task, but." And I said, "Why don't you contact the church down the street, St. James Lutheran? They've done this before. Perhaps they would be interested again." And it ballooned into what you see now with 8 churches working together. And I think we have a little over 50 volunteers that are in our community working with our family. And we have a structure that includes a medical team, a finance team, a publicity team, an education team, a team that works with personal finances. We have our board of directors. We have transportation teams. So we have all of these different structures that are in place that just kind of fell into place as we talked about what we would need to do here in the Gettysburg community to welcome the church. So yeah, I hear what you're saying, Julie. Alone we think, wow, this is a lot. But when you work with other churches, when you work with other organizations, it really makes this process. Now, I'm answering this from a different perspective than what Rayna is, who is in the trenches every day. But it has made this whole process for us here in Gettysburg such a ministry in our community with the different churches working together. It's just a delight to hear the stories and to see things happening. Rayna could tell you a totally different thing because she works in the trenches and I'm promoting, as you can tell. So I don't know if I answered your question at all, but if you do, as Andrew said, have a desire to sponsor a family, you would not have to do it alone, ever.
I want to briefly answer the rural question before handing over to Rayna. Is that if you are, I don't know exactly where you are. Sorry, not super familiar with Pennsylvania. I'll be there next month, though, to check out the Gettysburg Collaborative and maybe now St. Paul's, too. Pop over there and learn more about what you guys are doing. Anyway, so the rural problem is that it used to be until this year that if you lived more than 50 miles from a refugee office, you cannot resettle a refugee family. But now Church World Service and the federal government have created remote sponsorship programs that you have teams that will help you remotely and send you a family remotely through the virtual world, which is a great resource. However, is it ethical to resettle a family out in the middle of a cornfield or whatever they do out in rural Pennsylvania? It depends, but also Church World Service, maybe the federal government I don't really know much about the federal government's program. Church World Service isn't going to send you a family if it's not ethical, but it is worth a conversation if you're not within 50 miles of a refugee resettlement office to talk to Church World Service about if you guys would be a good site to match a family with remotely.
Yeah, and in that vein, so doing things remotely is actually admittedly something that the federal government is heavily encouraging resettlement agencies to invest resources in, to be able to expand that geographic footprint. One of the things, as was mentioned, it was the elimination of those mile radius restrictions to resettle families. One thing I can say is that Church World Service, through actually this Afghanistan situation, developed resources that really help communities in more remote locations self-analyze and assess their own communities of what resources are available should they resettle families. So it's a pretty, I mean, it's not a super in-depth process, but it gives you the ability to fill out a various number of forms and sort of scout out what resources are in your community. Where are the grocery stores? What are the school districts involved? What are the housing options? Admittedly, because there wouldn't be a resettlement agency within your general vicinity, there would be more, I think, for lack of a better term, expectations on deciphering those resources, as certainly Rayna can attend, looking for housing, looking for employment. Those are things and connections that resettlement agencies would not have. But we also do know that you know your community best. You know the ins and outs and what makes it tick.
Yeah, we are very rural. We are about 35 miles west of State College, east of State College, rather. And we're talking towns of 200, 300, 500, 600 people. So we're not talking a lot. I know a lot of the people who are really interested in this are actually closer to State College. So that might be an option. Presumably, some of the refugees come from farming families. So we are farmland, we are dairy area. Is there any kind of a resource that gives you an idea of what it takes and what happens when you resettle a family, just to get started and to get people started with the conversation?
So yeah, there are actually a number of resources that I'm wondering out loud if there would be the ability to make them available to people who are on this call specifically. I mean, I defer to the hosts, but of trying to get those resources to you. One thing you can do is actually, I can also put my email address in the chat function if you wanted to reach out to me. And yeah, just saying who you are and where you're from, and I can either try to find the closest resettlement agency to you, or yeah, at least share resources that we do have available for this process.
If you have documents or anything that you want shared with the people that are on the chat, you can email them to me. I'll send you my email, and I'll get them out to everyone.
Okay, excellent.
Thanks, Paul. Bruce Bouchard.
My question was pretty much what Julia just said. We did a refugee resettlement about 15 years ago, and I remembered the family was supposed to come in 5 weeks. They came the next week, and we really had to work hard to get a team set up, several teams in 5 churches to do this, and we did it. And I'm not sure how we did it, but I was wondering if there was any book, guidebook, refugee resettlements for idiots, or now we'd say, I guess, refugee resettlements for the refugee resettlement challenged. Okay.
I have a toolkit on the UCC Refugee and Migration website. Sorry, my son is currently banging at the door. You can probably hear him. But that toolkit was specific to the Afghan situation. However, it is a general model. I wrote it before I knew all the specifics of the Afghan situation. I just knew it was going to be a situation, but I knew it based on working in the refugee resettlement system. So you can go into Refugee and Migration Ministries on the UCC national website and look at the toolkits. CWS is the same types of toolkits on their websites as well.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Charlotte.
Hello. For the Gettysburg group, how did you acquire your family? Did you go through church word services or another mechanism?
Well, that's a good question. We had trouble even talking to a resettlement agency. As you may know, the resettlement agencies had been decimated during the last 5 or 6 years due to lack of funding and a very reduced number of refugees coming into the country. And so they had lost personnel, they had lost history and, just people. So we initially couldn't contact someone, and then we got a hold of Andrew here and he agreed to come to our Zoom meeting of our larger group to discuss what it would be like and answer all of our questions, and that was a great experience. As he pursued that idea, the fact that we were so far away from Lancaster, 55 miles or something. Others who were more used to the way that they were doing things decided that maybe it wasn't the best idea to have us so far away in the model that they were using at the time. So then we contacted Bethany Christian Services, which is a subcontractee of LIRS. And so we actually met with Andrew and someone from Bethany, and we kind of tossed it back and forth to see, well, could we work with the two of them, or could we work with one of them? And we wound up working with Bethany, and so that's how we got connected to Bethany Christian Services, and that has been our resettlement agency. So Andrew had a big part in getting us started and getting us, exploring what it all meant and how it worked. And we're very grateful for that.
So grateful that you would decide to do it again.
Well, we are planning, that is in our plan. When someone was asking, Julie, I think, when do you go to a second family? We haven't reached that point yet. And part of that is, I think, the size of the family, because for every person, you've got to have someone to to teach them, English. Like Sandy Bush here, she teaches English to the family, one or two members of the family. And so, you've got to have people to work directly with them on English. You've got to have these medical appointments. It's just been a lot of different things to manage with a family that's so large. Now, there's a Frederick Welcome Committee, Refugee Welcome Committee down in Maryland. And they started about the same time we did, and they are just welcoming their 7th family. But at the point where they had 5 families, they had only 14 people total, whereas we had 10 for one family. And so, yes, they had to have a lot more domiciles, a place to live, houses and furnishings. So that was a big focus for them, was acquiring all these donations and storing them and then getting them set up into housing units. But on the other hand, there, it was a lot of couples and or one child families. So in that respect, there wasn't so much need as far as medical and ESL and all of that. So I forgot what I was answering now, but I hope that answers part of it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions this evening? If not, I thank you all for joining us. I thank you, Rayna and Irene and Andrew, for sharing your knowledge with us this evening. You know, as a closing thought, if you have any inklings to sponsor, even in these daunting times of pandemic, I say go for it and do some research and see what you can come up with as a community. One of the things that we like to do here at Trinity is at the close of every one of our meetings, and it's particularly fun for Zoom sessions, we like to say the Lord's Prayer together. And I realize saying that there are multiple versions of the Lord's Prayer, even within the UCC, but I would invite you to say the Lord's Prayer with me in whatever words that you would like to use. And it's just fun listening to all of the Babel, shall we say, as in the Tower of Babel, as we say it in different places. So can we close this evening by saying the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven,
Hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. Amen.
You did not disappoint. Thank you all so much.
Go Babel, go.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Fred. It was great. It was great.